Got most of the stuff going. All right, so that's live. YouTube is live. Instagram is live. And the recording is active. All right. We'll have to turn off los cogelones for the moment. All righty. So, let's see, I think everything is good. We're going. We're going. All right. Well, yeah, it's good to have you all logged on again. I am obviously excited to finish off our Floricanto, aka Xochicalcat, uh, lesson from last week. Obviously, we weren't supposed to be meeting this particular week. I had originally planned on this being kind of like our little Thanksgiving vacation, but aquí estamos. Y pues I think it's actually more appropriate than not, given that you know, with this being Native American Heritage Month in the US, y aquí estamos hablando sobre los mexica, los poetas nahuas. You know, it makes sense, obviously, that we are finishing this particular lesson off with a bang. For those of you that are logged in on Zoom, obviously you have access to the handout. For anybody that is watching on our Instagram Live or YouTube Live after the fact, you're obviously able to partake in the class right now actively. And also, in addition to that, you can visit our website, distillarts.org/Conchas y Cafezine, and you can get caught up on the previous session related to this specific lesson. And you can also download the handout off of the website as well. To get us going, I wanted to first kind of check in with everyone. Those of you that attended last week, did you have any questions, anything that maybe came to mind after our first half of the lesson last week? Anything, I don't know, happened during the last week, maybe that inspired you, that made you think of the Floricanto lesson?
Yeah, this is Mary. Um, I had conversations with a couple of friends about it
Mhm.
because I just never, my mind was boggled. Of course, there were poets, but I never read anything about him, like to know a name. That's incredible.
Mhm.
Um, I'm really tired today, but I needed to be here because, yeah, it's a great topic, and yo creo que ahorita en México hay mucho entusiasmo para nuestra cultura
Mhm.
and lo que pasó con la I never pay attention to Miss Universe, but I don't know if you guys saw any of that, but uh, that she wore an indigenous, I think it may have been Nahuatl, uh, regalia.
Mhm.
She wore that in the Miss Universe. I mean, she wore a bandana. She goes, I'm representing my people.
Mhm.
And it's just all coming together
Yeah.
beautifully. Well, not here, but over there.
Yeah. Yeah, here in the US where we are now, maybe
Yeah.
not so much, but
No, no, no.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So thank you for doing this.
my pleasure. I wasn't aware that uh Miss Mexico in the competition wore regalia. I mean, I was a
Mhm.
little bit aware of some of the other stuff that happened, I guess, before the final thing. So,
Oh, yeah.
and like, some of them, I guess, alleged miscommunications. I mean, I don't really know the whole
Mhm.
story, so I don't really want to talk about it too much,
Right.
um, but I do think that it's maybe not coincidental that in Mexico at the moment there is a bit more pride in the on our ancestry, partly
Mhm.
because, this year in particular marks 500 years
Mm.
of, the Mexica
Mhm.
Empire,
Mm.
um, the establishment specifically of Mexico Tenochtitlan. And, that in itself is a very momentous occasion. It's like
Mm.
the bedrock of modern
Mhm.
contemporary Mexico City.
Mm.
The city itself was built on top of our temples, our ancestors' temples, for those of us that are from the
Mhm.
central region. And yeah, I think that given the theme too of the current Conchas y Café series, birds and galaxies, pájaros y galaxias,
Mhm.
I just felt like it was appropriate to introduce everyone, who maybe weren't as familiar with it, with the concept of the Xochicalcat and, how multifaceted it is. So, yeah,
Mm.
thank you, Miss Mary, for
Mhm.
sharing your experience this past week. Uh, ¿Hay alguien más que quiera compartir algunos, I don't know, opiniones, pensamientos, things that stood out to you since our last session? I saw some posts in the chat from River about, the lesson para recordarnos un poco sobre lo que hablamos. Let me go ahead and actually share the handout one more time. So aquí tenemos lo que estuvimos repasando la semana pasada. I also appreciate those of you that are logged in and are tired. Uh, I totally understand. Pero aquí empezamos with John Muir, the Scottish American writer. Y también aquí empezamos esta semana pasada, empezamos con Alegraos, one of the several poems that actually survived the conquest era by Nezahualcóyotl. And aquí lo tenemos en náhuatl. I also wanted to give us the opportunity to actually hear the poem performed in Nahuatl. I want to shout out Abraham also for sharing with us last week the link for that. So with that, I'm going to hopefully this will work, given that we are streaming right now on YouTube. Hopefully this won't create any issues. Pero aquí tenemos a Shon Awayakan. I'm not sure who is performing it, by the way. It comes from the Trece Lunas Project YouTube channel, pero ojalá y aquí se escuche bien. ¿Sí se escucha?
Intoquiapan cachuchiu, tlacelia xuchitli, hueponea xuchitli, oncanemitopi chachalaca tlatowa, hualonquimatli teotlichan, sanillo intoxochihuica, ica tonahuiyapan, sanillo incuicatl, ica unpupuliwi inamatlao.
Sorry. I don't think it shared correctly for those of you on. So let me restart that. Hopefully it will work better this time. All right, I'm going to restart it. Y a ver si se escucha mejor.
Xonahuiyacan.
All right.
Ika xonahuiyacan iuinti xochitli, tomacmani. Maonte ya kiloto xochicosqui. Intoquiapan ca xochiu, tlacelia xochitli, hueponia xochitli. Onca nemitotl chachalaca tlatowa, hualonquimatli teotlichan. Sanillo into xochihuica, ica tonahuiyacan. Sanillo in cuicatl, ica un pupuliwi inamatlaocol. Intepilhuan ica yehua, amele lonquisa, quiyocoya inipalnemoua, quiyaualtemouia, moyocoyatzin, inayahuailo xochitli, ica yehua, amele lonquisa.
¿Y qué pensaron de Xonahuayican, Ahuiyacan, Benezahuacoyotl? Deja ponérselo aquí también en la pantalla. There we go. So obviously we only listened to it the one time, pero in Nahuatl, did it sound any particular way to any of you? ¿Cuál fue su impresión del performance? Did you have anything that stood out to you specifically from the performance? It had a soothing glow. Can appreciate the description, River. Thank you. Of course, here we have it in the translations. Abraham?
Just like what we have done many times that we translate poems.
Mhm.
Sometimes they work, sometimes they lose some of the magic, sometimes they totally don't work. But this one does have that kind of sounds, right? That go together with all the words. Well, in English or Spanish, they do sound more of a I understanding what you're saying, but the sounds are a little bit lost of the rhymes, right?
Mhm.
How each of the words sound, which I really enjoy.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I could make an attempt reading the first line in Nahuatl. I mean, I don't speak Nahuatl. I'm not 100% familiar with the phonetics, pero hay que compararlo, ¿verdad? Ika shon ahuiyacan iwinti xochitli, en comparación a alegraos con las flores que embriagan, en comparación con rejoice with the flowers that intoxicate. I mean, obviously the various layers of translation aquí, pues, they're going to affect our ability to perceive the poem in a particular way, no?
Yeah, I think the float's even different. The other one's more like, like old school flowery kind of a
Mm.
Spanish tone to it. And the other one has more like tick tack, kind of a different pace to it.
¿Entre cuáles? ¿El inglés o you're muted, man?
So I think the Spanish has and the English have kind of the same pace. They flow
Ah,
like
okay.
a little straight and more smooth. The other one has more of a tick tack kind of some like going a little faster.
Mhm.
And I really see that like and it's just again the beauty of the languages, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. Yeah, I guess you could see how. I mean, a ver, ika son ahuiyacan iwinti xochitl tomacmani maon te ya aquilot xochicosquit in toquia pan casochiu tlacelia xochitli cueponia xochitli oncan nemito totn chachalaca tlatoua cual on kimati teo ichan. And that's just the first half, right? And then again in Spanish, alegraos con las flores que embriagan, las que están en nuestras manos, que sean puestos ya los collares de flores, nuestras flores del tiempo de lluvia, fragantes flores, abren ya sus corolas. And then in English, rejoice with the flowers that intoxicate, those that are in our hands. Don now the flower necklaces, our flowers from the rainy season, fragrant flowers, now open their corollas. I don't think I read all the way through to the halfway mark, pero you probably do get the sense, right, of how language can affect the rhythms and pues todo, ¿verdad? I see a hand raise from Elena.
I just want to say I'm sorry I came late. I just finished my dinner just now, so
Okay.
did I miss anything?
You just missed us listening to a native Nahuatl speaker performing the poem, but aside from that, welcome. Thank you for joining.
We're not doing that feedback today, right?
No, not today.
Okay,
Finishing our lesson, the Sochi.
okay.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Elena. So again, to just kind of review what we had talked about last week, we talked about, the long history of poetry in pre-Hispanic Mexico, modern day Mexico. And yes, thank you, Mary. It was a woman. We don't know exactly the age, but it was a female performer. Um, and in talking about the history, the long history of poetry within Mexico, pre-Hispanic Mexico specifically, I wanted to make sure that we acknowledged that this is only one type of poetry, right? This is only one specific culture's poetry that we were discussing this time around. And that's partly because the other cultures, the other indigenous groups of Mexico weren't as large at the time of the encounter with the Spanish as the Mexica. The Mexica were the people also known as Aztecs who spoke Nahuatl. And because that empire was the strongest empire at that time, during that time period, they're the ones that had ultimately the last word. Um, it's also worth remembering too that Nahuatl is still spoken. It's not a dead language. And I'm sure there are still to this day Nahuatl poets that are writing poetry and music and other forms of Xochicuicue in Nahuatl. Just like there's still to this day people that speak Zapotec or people that speak Otomi or Purepecha or the Quechua Maya, Quiche Maya, excuse me. So the indigenous people of Mexico still exist. Their languages are still being spoken, although it might be, a little less and less as every generation goes by. That's why it's important that we remember these things and that we be exposed to them, especially for those of us that identify as part of that culture, as part of our ancestry. So some of the terms that we covered last time uh, referred to people like the poet singers, los Xochitla, excuse me, Xochilatoanime, or the Cuicapique, the flower speakers or the song makers. Y también hablamos sobre las distinciones que existen en la poesía náhuatl, cuáles son los netotilitzin y los masewalitzin. Los netotilitzin son, se puede decir, poesías seculares. The secular type of poetry that was more common is the netotilitzin. And then there's the masewalitzin, which was very specific to a group. It's poetry or songs that were related to a specific deity or a teot within the pantheon of deities in the culture. Does anyone have anything they want to add or any questions related to those ideas that we talked about last week?
I would.
Hmm.
Um. So I don't know if I make it to the last session. Is that because I was busy, but I don't know what happened. Something has to do with boxing and Zumba, but I don't know how this happened because I came late.
Okay. Well, no worries, Elena. At least you're here at the moment now, and you'll be able to listen to all the stuff that we're covering, okay?
Yeah, but unfortunately, I will be here on December 2nd because I don't have Zeus Fitness that day, so I get to join you on December 2nd.
Okay, this sounds good. Thanks
Yeah.
for letting us know.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Uh, so does anyone else have any other questions or things that they'd like to share that they were able to maybe ruminate on over the last week up to this point? No? All right. So again, just as a review, the Xochicuicatl is essentially called the Floricanto now. Xochicuicatl specifically or directly means flower song, and it's a sort of blanket term that has been used to describe all of the Nahuatl poetry that existed or probably still continues to exist up to this day. It's also a generalized term that refers to song, poetry, and other forms of art, including dance, in uh, more like a modern context. But the term itself specifically is flower song, Xochicuicat. And the Xochicuicame are literally songs about flowers or relating to the ceremonies of the Teot Xochiquetzal, which was the deity that represented flowers. It all and also represented the concept of beauty. And that's partly why the term Xochicuicat was essentially adopted as a term for talking about poetry or art or all things that are considered beautiful. And within the larger genre of the Xochicuicat, there exist the four different styles that we reviewed last week, empezando con el Teocuicat. Teocuicat significa los cantos a los dioses. Estos serían los cantos o poesías que son que típicamente suelen ser parte del Masewalitzin, de esa tradición. The Teocuicat is more of the religious poetry or song, and therefore would be the type that would only be created and performed by priests, people that were associated with the deity. And then there's the Xochicuicat, which again, that's the generalized term for poetry and art. And these would be typically poems about poetry, or what maybe in a more modern context would be referred to as an ars poetica, things that are about poetics or the concepts behind poetry and art. Luego existen también los Yaocuicat, los cantos a la guerra o batallas. The Yaocuicat would probably also be used to maybe create like a historical record of different battles, wars that were won, or even warriors. Y de esa manera puede ser algo un poco más secular uh, in nature. Y luego también el Ichnocuicat, cuáles son los lamentos, cantos a la angustia. And, that's a fairly common form of poetry across all cultures, the lament. Um, just like, poems about love and beauty and art. So these sort of like styles of the Xochicuicat They're styles that we would find in other regions, in other areas across the world. So they're nothing that I would say is unique specifically to the Mexica or to any other culture outside of the approach that the Xochicalcat would typically take. Um, and then when it comes to the approach, obviously there's certain culturally specific things that would make them specifically the Xochicuicat. And last week we ended more or less on this section here, where estábamos hablando sobre las características poéticas que se ven más en el estilo del Xochicuicat, o el género Xochicuicat. The first page of techniques that we had looked at are fairly common in other forms of poetry as well. So things like the repetition, the use of repetition, refrains or choruses, those are things that are common to other forms of poetry in other nations across the world and cultures. También el paralelismo es algo que es común en poesía, pero es una de las características que sí se ve más en este género de Xochicuicat. When referring to parallels, it's the repetition of ideas done in different ways. And that's one way in which you can see how a parallel is structured. You might be saying the same words or the same concept, but kind of switching it up each time. There's also keywords or themes, concepts that are going to be a part of the particular poem. And then there's the use of interjections. And when I talked about interjections last week, I talked a little bit about how in some cases it might be a second voice or a third voice. Estas voces, las voces secundarias o como sea, they would be typically like a call and response kind of structure en donde ah, hay que decir el narrador o el cantante principal dice un estribillo o algo así y luego hay una contestación. That's another way in which you might have seen how interjections would be used in the poetry of the Xochicuicat. And that's something that you could probably also find in like other religious ceremonies. If you think about like maybe a choir, maybe saying one verse or something like that, or a line of lyrics in like a church, and then the parishioners in the church would respond back with like an amen or something like that. Are there any questions so far acerca de esto, estas características que acabo de mencionar? No? Okay. Now this is where we spent a good part of our time last week. Yeah, it is similar to music lyrics. That's a good way to think about the Xochicuicat. You might have, especially in music, in performance, you will have things like the interjections and the call and response approach to lyricism and poetry. Thank you, River. Pues, como digo, aquí pasamos mucho, mucho rato hablando sobre esto, el difracismo y los kennings la semana pasada. The metonymy is, again, a figure of speech using an object or concept to refer to a related idea. And when we looked at some of the metonymies that I specifically pulled from our reference material last week, we were looking at the ones that are here. And I think everybody did a pretty decent job at guessing what the metonymy stood for. Um, Estábamos hablando de que Inatl, Intepetl en náhuatl significa la ciudad. And, the metonymy here, water and mountain, is meant to replace the concept of a city or of a place of residence for a lot of people. And it kind of makes sense if you think of it in the terms of like, you need shelter and you need water. Entonces, el usar este difracismo para describir la ciudad o el pueblo, estamos entendiendo de que es un lugar a donde hay suficientemente agua y protección contra los elementos. Um, so that's one way that you could think of the use of mononymy in a Xochicalcat. We also talked about the kenning, and kennings are found in other languages as well. And it's usually the composition of two words together to form a kind of new word or a name. Um, I guess maybe like the stereotypical way that it might be used would be to like describe somebody that is a particular profession. Um, Kenning, I believe, also stems from an Old Norse use of language. So things like the thunder bringer, to describe, like, say, Thor, um, or sister wife, a kenning. Yeah, that would be an example of a kenning, where it's two words that are brought together to create a new name or a new label for someone. Like I said, Thor, the Thunderbringer, that would be something that is considered a kenning. Fireman, yeah, like the man who, controls fire. That would be a kenning. Um, un aguafiestas, por ejemplo, en español. Si consideramos las dos palabras, ¿verdad? Agua y fiestas. Si le llamas aguafiestas a una persona, les estás poniendo hay que decir apodo, que significa que pues, vienen pues, a echar agua a la fiesta, you know, to crash the party pooper. Yeah, exactly. So that's how a kenning functions in most uses. Y como habíamos hablado la semana pasada, aquí tenemos unos ejemplos de kennings en náhuatl. And I think this one was probably the one that most people were able to understand right off the bat. Inmitl inchimali, dardo y escudo. Esa combinación significa guerra or batalla. And, dart and shield together, I think can be pretty self-explanatory, right? Those are the tools of war. So, of course, when you say inmitl inchimali, then you're saying, everybody get ready to fight. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions at the moment? Is this all sounding familiar for those of you that were here last week? ¿Lo entienden mejor, quizá esta vez? Yeah, we covered all of that. ¿Había alguna duda desde la semana pasada? Anything that maybe you didn't quite understand last time that you'd like us to review one more time? Good question. So the question is, how are metonymy and kennings different? By definition, they are used to express two different ideas. Um, a metonymy is more specifically using the object or objects related to a concept to describe that concept. So in these English examples that I have on the handout, a scepter or like a staff, that is encrusted with jewelry, a scepter, that can be used as a symbol or a metaphor for sovereignty or for the king, right? For a monarch. Another way that you can think about a metonymy is in some of the phrases that we might use to describe an act, such as count heads, right? To count heads means to count the number of people in attendance or whatever the case might be, right? Or like this example here of using the bottle, quote unquote, as the idea of drinking an alcoholic beverage. You say the person hit the bottle hard. You're saying that they're getting drunk. Um, and that's how a metonymy typically works. You use an object that is related to the concept. Um, in the Nahuatl expressions that we looked at, it was a little bit more nuanced. So it wasn't a perfect metonymy in the way that like it is in English. Um, but like if we were to, yeah, again, look at the difference between a metonymy and a kenning is more of a way to name something. So you're using ideas to give a name to a or an attribute to a specific person or uh, maybe another object or idea. So here in the examples at least that relate to what we've been discussing. Eagles and jaguars were the two classifications for the warriors of the Mexica. Entonces, un águila y un jaguar juntos sería un guerrero, right? The eagles and jaguars are warriors. That's just a way of referencing a warrior. Um, the term Xochiclicat, it means flower and song. And so that became a kenning for poetry and art. Uh, yeah, that's I think a good example. River. The to say, he wifed up or she wifed up would mean, they got married, right? If you get uh or like cuffing, I know that that's a term that's used. It's like a slang term that's used in the East Coast when it's cuffing season, it's the season of, going out and finding a partner. And then to say a sister wife, a person is a sister wife, then yeah, that would be more of a kenning because that's a label that they have been assigned. Um, yeah, so hopefully that makes sense. ¿Cuál es amante de lo ajeno, Abraham?
Ladrón.
Un ladrón. Ah, yeah, there you go. Um, yeah, I guess River makes a good point. They could be considered subsets of metaphor. So they're a type of metaphor, a more, you know, creative way of creating metaphors out of nothing. That's a way that you could think about it. Like in some of these examples in the Nahuatl, if we look at the scorpion, the nettle, this particular phrase, Incolotl intsitzcali, intzitzicatzli, uh, Incolotl intsitzcatzli, meaning the scorpion, the nettle, both of them have certain characteristics in common, right? The scorpion has a stinger, the stinging nettle has needles. So as two things that create discomfort or pain, for it to be a way of talking about the consequences of something, or like, um, yeah, like discipline, right? That makes sense because they're related to the idea that it's describing. So does that help? Does that clarify a little more? Buenas noches, Aurea. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so good examples there in the chat river. Water and mountain is like let's go to the city. Yeah. And then dart and shield is like everyone mount up. Exactly. Fog and smoke. A ver, él es de niebla y humo. Do y'all remember what this one was? In Nayahuitl, Impocli. A ver, ¿quién se acuerda? He's the fog and smoke type. No me digan que ya se les olvidó. So, fog and smoke in Ayahuitl, Impocli means fame. It's obviously a bit more of a culturally specific one. Um, you were close, Abraham. But yeah, I mean, culturally speaking, for the Mexica, for the people that spoke Nahuatl, they would have understood niebla y humo as fame. When those two things are together, they indicate a sense of spectacle, a sense of fame. Um, he's the shit or he's hot stuff. Uh, I mean, it's in that vein, but it is more like a sense of celebrity. It's a person that is well known because they're an entertainer. Um, the the it girl, yeah, sure. The it girl. Este, and I guess you could consider like the way that a magician might use the spectacle of like smoke and little smoke bombs and that kind of thing as a way to create the sense of uh entertainment. Then that's how you could think of fog and smoke in Ayahuitl in Pocli. El otro, Mixtitlan, Ayahuititlan, the in clouds and mists. Oh, and nubes y nieblas. That one was the one that Abraham mentions. What's mysterious. So again, something that is kind of shrouded in clouds and mists or in fog. The shrouding effect, the mixtitlan, ayawititlan, those conjugations make it uh, more about the act of or being in, you know, a shrouded environment. And that would have been mysterious. And then the other one, what was the other one? Oh, the bag and box. Yes. So, en Morral y Caja, Toco, Petlacalco. That one, do y'all remember what that one was? Cloak and Dagger. Yeah. En Nubes y Nieblas, Cloak and Dagger. Topco Petlacalco. A ver, ¿quién se recuerda de este? ¿Qué significa ese? It's in the bag and box. Mhm. Thank you, Abraham. Yes. So that one's a secret. When something is in the bag and box, it means that it's a secret. It's something that is hidden or a secret that's being kept. And that one, if you think about it, it's about, yeah, exactly, being zipped up tight, lock and key. Yeah, exactly. So those would be some phrases that are used in English to talk about something that is being hidden away. So if it's in a bag or in a box or in a bag and a box, in this case, topco pet la calco, then it means that it is being hidden. It is a secret. Muy bien. Any other questions? Anyone else want any other clarifications? So I don't have this actually as an exercise on the handout, but just to give us kind of like a chance to maybe come up with our own, I'd like to give you all at least 2 minutes here to think of some either kennings like a label that you want to give, maybe say yourself. If you consider yourself a warrior, right? You'd be the eagle and jaguar. Um, but think of like, you're naming something and use a kenning to name that thing, whether it's a dog, another individual, maybe a box, place where you want to keep your secrets. Create a kenning and use that to name whatever it is. And let's see if we can figure it out as a group. I'll leave this up on the screen for you, but give me at least one kenning in the chat, si pueden. Rubber and circle. Okay. The left and the right. A caminar. Órale. The rabbit punch. A los chingazos. Metal, smoke, and rubber.
The car
Yeah. Is that a car?
or driving fast?
Car.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Race car, speeding car. Okay. Hop in the metal, smoke, and rubber. A ver, ¿quién más? Anyone else? Any other? Yeah, I can admit it's maybe not the easiest thing in the world, but maybe it'll help a little. If you can't come up with any at the moment, but oh, there you go, the bottle magician, el borracho. Yeah. Uh,
How about something? This is Dr. Rosie. Hi, I finally got in.
Hi,
Jeez.
Dr. Rosie.
I'm trying to understand what you're doing because as you know that I wasn't able to get in last week. But how about something like sleeping with poison, like you're dead or you're gonna die,
Sleeping with poison. Ugh.
like the that there's a music one. I can't. It slips my mind where the couple they poison each other or she poisons him and he dies, so sleep that just came to my mind. I'm
Ro-
trying to get into that.
Like Romeo and Juliet, is that?
Yes, yeah, the Romeo and Juliet where
Yeah.
the poison is what kills them. So is it sleep with poison? No, huh? Does that make sense as a kenning?
It could, yeah. I mean, sleeping with poison, meaning like an eternal sleep. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
That sounds more like sleeping like with the enemy or something like, it's like
mm,
sleeping is kind of a intimate,
yeah.
and then poison is something dangerous. It's like
Well,
having
but
friendship or love
you're gonna
that's
die. You're gonna
dangerous.
if you're dead. You're dead if you're sleeping with poison.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I think River did provide a couple of good kennings there in the chat. Um,
Okay.
internet parlance, like chatting over the internet or like internet speak. Dirt nap to describe, a person that has died. He's taking a dirt nap,
Yeah.
right? And the forever box, which would be like a coffin. Um, like those are good examples of existing kennings. Yeah.
Or a happy meal.
Or a happy meal, sure. Um, they I think the line between a metonymy and a kenning can be blurred a little bit, but ultimately, I mean, don't take the now what uh phrases as like the true definition of a metonymy and a kenning, because typically the metonymy, the difracismo, it's meant to be an object that is associated with a concept. That is what a metonymy is. So, like in the English examples, a scepter or like a crown, when we talk about the crown, or we say, he gave alms, or he gave tribute to the crown, you're saying that you're giving tribute to the king, not just the concept of monarchy, right? Put the fries in the bag. uh I guess that could be metonymy, right? Because you're talking about uh like, give me the business, right? Or what's the 411? Those would be idioms, yes. So those would be kind of in the gray area of what a metonymy is. But a metonymy is more specifically an object that is used to describe something else. So, like I said, the crown for royalty, um, a badge for a person in authority. Um, ¿Qué más? Uh, I'm kind of at a loss right now for some more examples off the top of my head that we use in everyday speech. But these are also going to be, I guess, more culturally specific, because these things may not mean the same in other cultures either. A kenning is when you do take two words and combine them together to create a third meaning. Um, Yeah, that's a good one, Miss Luce. The stethoscope. If you are maybe saying, voy a visitar el let me go have a conversation with the stethoscope. You're probably referencing like going to a doctor or having your heart checked, or something like that. Um, so so the metonymy again is going to be an object that is going to be used as a metaphor for a broader concept. Pig for a cop. Yeah, sure. You know, that's a more common metonymy that you might hear. Uh, you know, a kenning again is two words that are being combined together to create a label for something. So, again, if you think of like some of the terms that are used to describe like a Norse god. Those are some of the ones that I'm most familiar with. You can also think of them as like some of the indigenous names that tribes have, for like individuals, like, or like the movie Dances with Wolves, right? That's three words, but Dances with Wolves is actually the name that is given to the character that Kevin Costner plays. That becomes his indigenous name. Um, those would be kennings. Does that make sense for everyone?
How about bone house?
Ooh, that's a
Bones.
good one.
That could it because it symbolizes a human body
Yeah, yeah, the bone house or a bone bag,
or
right?
bonehead.
Yeah, bonehead is also technically a kenning, because you're using two ideas, or two objects to describe an idea, right? A bone and a head, a person that is dumb. I'm not familiar with a hangman banquet, uh, but yeah, I guess that could be one. The old ball and chain. Yeah, that might be another one.
Are we kind of getting it now?
Yeah, I think people are starting to get it. Respeto sus canas. Yeah. Respeto su experiencia. Very good. That's a good one, Grisel. The Cheetos president.
Those president.
Yeah, I think we all kind of know that reference. Um, a hangman banquet is where enemies are invited to parlay but end up betrayed. Yeah, I guess that could be culturally speaking. Like if a person understands the hangman banquet's cultural reference, then yeah. I'm not familiar with the red wedding, but yeah, it's the similar idea. Those could work as kennings. Cheeto, I wouldn't say stands alone as a metonymy specifically if it's, you know, like maybe people might say, like in Spanish, sabritas, right? Voy por unas sabritas. You're saying you're going for chips, but sabritas is specifically a brand. And, you're using that brand as a generalized way of talking about the type of food you're getting. It's like people that might refer to a soft drink, any kind of soft drink, regardless of the flavor, as a Coke. Just give me a Coke, you know. Um, Apparently people do that. I learned recently in certain parts of the country. Or like Xerox. That's maybe another example of a metonymy. Uh, I'm gonna get a Xerox. It's a copy machine. Xerox is a brand, but it's used now as a way to say copy machine.
So the kenning is it is like a compound metaphors, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
La Virgen de Guadalupe is a symbol during colonization by using La Virgen to represent the Mexica female deity. Yeah, La Virgen de Guadalupe is generally uh, i- believed to have been a manifestation of Xochiquetzal. Yeah, the Mexica deity. Hablar de dientes para afuera as a
Chismoso.
yeah, I think that one would probably fall under
Es ser hipócrita
ser
o
hipócrita.
mentir. Yeah.
Oh, ser hipócrita.
That's mentir. Yeah. Um, yeah, as a dicho, I would say that dicho would fall under maybe more the kenning, el de dientes por fuera.
I never heard of that, but that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a good one. So I hope all of this is helping, right? It's, I think, good to ideate together, especially because we will be reviewing some of that, or you don't have to, obviously. Uh, the homework assignment can take you wherever you go, but I am going to encourage you as part of the homework to explore using one or the other.
Hmm.
Pero en fin, lo que no tuvimos tiempo de repasar la semana pasada fue este poema. Y por eso hoy tenemos la segunda parte de la lección. Um, I wanted to give a little bit of background also before we read this next poem. This is the last or second to last page on the handout. And this particular poem, which again, all of the phrases and the poems that we discussed last week came from this particular book, the poems Quince Poetas del Mundo Náhuatl, escrito compuesto por Miguel León Portillo. And then the frasismos and the kennings all come from this book right here, El Diccionario del Náhuatl en el Español de México. So these are the two reference books that I pulled all this information from. And al leer sobre este poeta, Xayacamac, de Tizatlán. Aquí, como ven, nació, no se sabe exactamente cuándo nació, pero nació entre el año 1450 y 1455. It is known that he was killed in battle, pero no se sabe precisamente cuál batalla ni, ni el año. Pero fue antes del año 1500. Y también se sabe que fue gobernante y poeta, un cuicapique de Tlaxcalan. Tlaxcalan is also where Nezahualcóyotl was actually from. And Yacamach was one of the participants, we'll say, in the conference of Tlamatini. Tlamatini in Nahuatl means philosophers, and Cuicapique, the poets. So this was the Poets and Philosophers Conference of the year 1490. So he was one of the people who was there for this specific conference. And just like other conferences, I guess, even today, the purpose of it was to specifically discuss and record poetry. Um, More specifically, it was about what the Nahuatl poets believed the function or the purpose of the poetry was. Right? So ellos querían usar su filosofía básicamente para distinguir o para, I don't know, para fomentar las ideas tras el Xochicalco. Right? They really wanted to develop and make the form of poetry grow and become something more established. Y I guess as a reminder, the year 1490 was 2 years before Christopher Columbus sailed the seas and arrived in the West Indies, not even in Mexico. So we're talking about approximately 50 to 60 years before Hernán Cortés arrived in the Central Valley of Mexico. So this was happening well before the Spanish incursion into Mexica, Tenochtitlan. Um, it's also pretty cool. Yeah, definitely pre-internet. It's also pretty cool to know that this was one of the very few instances where poetry was actually written in Nahuatl, using the glyphs that were used by Nahuatl scribes of the time. Y la única razón por que esto existe hoy es porque el fray Bernardino de Sahagún um, had the forethought or the interest in preserving the language of the time, right? So this work, it exists as part of the Cantares Mexicanos, and you can actually visit this and see it in person at the Mexican National Library in the Ciudad de Mexico. So again, I think it's really, really cool personally to think that en ese tiempo también tenían sus conferencias y sus ideas sobre qué significa la poesía. So, all right, all that background now out of the way. Do I have a volunteer? ¿Hay alguien que quiera leer para nosotros, ya sea el español o el inglés? De, oh amigos, os ando buscando. Oh, friends, I search for thee. Do I have a volunteer?
I could do Spanish.
Okay. Whenever you're ready, Giselle.
No, okay. Oh amigos, a vosotros os ando buscando. Recorro los campos floridos y al fin aquí estáis. Alegraos narrar vuestras historias. Oh amigos, ha llegado vuestro amigo. ¿Acaso entre flores vengo a introducir la flor del caldillo y de huicle, las flores menos bellas? ¿Acaso soy también invitado, yo menesteroso, oh amigos? ¿Yo quién soy? Volando me vivo, compongo un himno, canto las flores, mariposa de canto, surjan de mi interior, saboréenlas mi corazón. Llevo junto a la gente, he bajado yo, ave de la primavera, a la tierra me acerco, extendiendo mis alas. En el lugar de los atables floridos, sobre la tierra se levanta, brota mi canto. Aquí cultivo cantos, junto he brotado, solo amontono tierra, con cuerdas de oro ato, mi vasija preciosa. Yo que soy vuestro pobre amigo, solo atisbo las flores, yo amigo vuestro. El brotar de las flores matizadas, con flores de colores he techado mi cabaña. Con eso me alegro en las cementeras del Dios. Allá alegría, si de veras te alegrarás en el lugar de las flores, tu ataviado con collares, señor de Cayohuatzin, ¿acaso de nuevo volveremos a la vida? Así lo sabe tu corazón, solo una vez hemos venido a vivir. He llegado a los brazos del árbol florido, yo florido colibrí. Con aroma de flores me deleito, con ellas mis labios endulzo. Oh dador de la vida, con flores eres invocado. Nos humillamos aquí, te damos deleite en el lugar de los floridos atabales. Señor Atecpagnecal, allí se guarda el tamboril, en la casa de la primavera. Allí te esperan tus amigos. Yoamanatzin, Micohuatzin, Ayocuatzin. Ya con flores suspiran los príncipes.
Excellent. Thank you, Grisel. ¿Y en inglés? Exactly. Todos los sin. Do I have a volunteer that would like to read it in English for us? Is that Miss Mary? Would you like to give it a shot in English?
Sure. Let's see. I just can't.
Let's see. Can make it a little bit bigger for you here.
Okay. All right. O friends, for thee I search. I traverse the florid fields, and at last here you are. Rejoice, tell thine stories. O friends, thy friends has arrived. It is possible that among flowers I come to introduce the flower of the burweed and honeysuckle, the least beautiful of flowers. Perhaps I too am invited, the less wealthy of friends. Who am I? I live flying. I compose a hymn. I sing the flowers, butterfly of songs. They search from within me, savor them, my heart. I arrive among the people. I have descended a springtime bird. To the ground I get close. I extend my wings over the place of flowery, sawing fields. Over the soil it rises, my chant sprouts. Here I cultivate songs. Simultaneously I have sprouted. I only pile dirt with golden cords. I bind my precious pot. I who am thine poor friend. I only hint of flowers, thine friend. This English stuff is the sprouting of blended flowers. With colorful flowers, I have roofed my cabin. Sorry,
Mhm.
I had a call coming in. I had to get rid of it. Um, okay. That I am happy. Sorry about that. With that, I am happy among the sowed fields of the God. You have happiness. If you really are happy in the place of flowers, you, adorned with necklaces, Lord Takeye Watson, or perhaps we will return to life anew. This is your heart knows only once we have come to live. I have arrived to the arms of the flowering tree. I, a florid hummingbird, with the aroma of flowers, I am delighted. I am delighted with them. I sweeten my lips. O giver of life, with flowers you are invoked. We humble ourselves here. We bring you pleasure in the place of the flowery sowing fields. Lord Atepanekatl, there are the small drum is there are the small drum is kept in the house of spring. There your friends await you. Yamonatsin, Mikowatsin, Ayukwatsin. The princes now yearn for flowers.
Excellent. Thank you, Miss Mary. And of course, I do have it here also in the Nahuatl. Y como ven ahí tienen su tarea. But does somebody want to give it a try in the Nahuatl? Or shall we just go into the conversation, ya que ya mero se nos acaba el tiempo? Maybe Abraham can do me the favor and find it. This one is for me.
Yeah, that's. Let me see. What the things I don't have the typing of this one.
Yeah, it's Shayakamach.
Let's see if I can.
I'll give it a try. A ver
Okay, go for it.
cómo me sale.
Sweet. Yeah.
Antok niwane namek tetemoa by Shayakamach. Atok niwane namek tetemoa sesen kwebmitl niktoka. Outsonikan ankate. Shom papak tiktiakan sontl atlan ketstikan. Sanye oniwalatsik in namosnio. Inquish ikla sochil canicual calaquia in tzitzikil sochil mosokil sochil quish yuki quish now nayowi inoto linia in antokniwan akin newa ni papalatin tinemi notlalia nishochin cuica papalotl malel nequisa manoyolquimati aitopan nuitz nitemoc innicho panquechol nitlapal nasiso ninososo wa xochihuehuetitlan nocuicseualvo tlalpan onquisa o anqui can no ne xochiopauia cuicatl, itlan nonquiquisa, ino tzan tlatlahuia, no quetzalicolo, teocuitl amecate amecatica, nixtlipaya, namo nioitniu, tzan nixotlapia, namo niuitzin, niutzin, Xochin apal ishuatica, nocotzona, nosochin apisacalitzin, inik non-pactica, ye cuacuentla, ye guanteo, ma shona wican, tlaoc senca shonpacta, Xochin cocotz capatzine, tel cayewat teutli, quish osepa ye tonemiquio, inyu kimati muyol, san sentim nemok. Oyani walatzik Xochincuahuitl, imapan, nisho chichihuitzl, nino ya kawilitika, inik nomapatika, wilik noten, ye guanteot ipal nemuani, ye xochitica, tontla atlau itlioya, ye toton pechteca, yan timitzon nahuitla, wilitia, Xochi huehuetitlan, atecpanecatl teucli, ompialo huehuetl, ye oncan xopan calitec, mitzonchia, ye mogniwan, yamanatzin, micohuatzin, in ayocuahuatzin, ye xochitica onel sisiuiu, in teteuctin. That was a challenge.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. So, what do we notice in this poem? And I think it may have come across too, even in the Nahuatl, is as maybe butchered as I pronounced it. Pero, what stood out to you? ¿Qué fue lo que, I don't know, resaltó en el poema?
There's a lot of cultural references that, like the words that we were describing before,
Mhm,
like things that we, because we don't are not in the culture,
mhm,
are missing out of this poem, right? Even the people at the end, right? Either gods or the scenes.
mhm. De los príncipes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at the very end, los príncipes que se dan aquí como referencia, these are at least one of them, cuando se le pregunta, ¿acaso no estás alegre? Si de veras te alegrarás en el lugar de las flores, tú ataviado con collares, señor Tecayehuatzin. He is actually the organizer of this particular conference. So here, the poet is directly referencing or directly calling out the organizer of the conference, which is why, I wanted to give a little bit of that background, which I forgot to say here.
El patrocinador.
El patrocinador, el organizador, Tecayehuatzin. Y era un príncipe, uno de los Tlatoani pues, de Huexotzinco. So yeah, so that right there is specifically a reference, pero también como ven aquí at the very end, we have Yaumanatzin, Mikowatzin, and Ayocuatzin, todos los tzines, quienes son nombrados como príncipes, ¿verdad? And because they are referenced, they're not people that are there, but also the Lord Atepacnecatl That's not a person that was there that I'm aware of. Um, so as evidenced in, what we talked about of the things that are typical of the Floricanto is, those interjections, you know,
Like in
addressing people that are not there.
on the House of Spring, see?
Hmm.
And the guys are waiting over there for that
Yeah.
other person.
Yep. En la casa
Which,
de primavera.
yeah. So I don't know, it's a temple or actually like a
Mhm.
place,
It would be a metaphorical
like
place.
a laughter live or things like that. I don't know.
Yeah. In my impression of the poem, that is a reference to the place where poetry comes from.
Yeah, because
Porque,
they're journeying for flowers, which is basically arts.
mhm, yeah, and poetry, canto. Um, and that's also something to remember, right? This is a Xochiquetzal or Xochicuicapi, Cuicape. Actually, no, more specifically, Xochicuicat. So this is a floricanto in which the flower is a symbol for poetry and art. So when he says here, the flower of the burweed and honeysuckle, ¿acaso entre flores vengo a introducir la flor del cadío y el muisle? Entre flores vengo a introducir, meaning here in flowers or in poetry, I am coming to introduce my own flowers, right? The burweed and the honeysuckle no son las flores más bellas. Quiere decir que él no viene a presentar la poesía más bonita, porque él no se cree un gran poeta, right? He is the less wealthy of his friends, el menosteroso. So he's saying, I am a humble poet. Am I bringing you some poetry that's not as good as yours, maybe? ¿Verdad? Pero acaso no estoy invitado? Am I not invited to participate? So if we look at it from that point of view, that he's talking about poetry. Yo quién soy, volando me vivo, compongo un himno, canto las flores, mariposa de canto. Here he's giving his idea of what his purpose is as a poet. He lives flying, composing hymns, and singing flowers. He is a butterfly of song. No es un ave, es un papalote, un butterfly. And he describes his process here. I arrive among the people. I have descended a springtime bird. To the ground I get close. I extend my wings over the place of flowery sowing fields. So he's basically saying here that he has a more humble approach to creating poetry, poetry that is reflective of the people, poetry that's maybe not as metaphorical, definitely more secular, ¿verdad? Él no se considera como un sacerdote de, I don't know, Quetzalcoatl, por ejemplo. Does anyone else have any other thoughts or questions, maybe, surrounding the poem?
Se refiere con atables floridos.
Los atables floridos, the sowing fields. So, el lugar a donde, el campesino trabaja.
Hmm. It's a
So,
weird word.
yeah, atable, it's castellano, you know. Pero está hablando como de las zanjas en donde en las milpas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the sowing fields. The materia primogénita de la poesía. Because where does poetry come from? Or where do the flowers come from? Perdón.
Yeah, from the
Flowers,
fields.
flowers
This
come
case.
from the
Huh.
ground. Yeah. Sobre la tierra se levanta, brota mi canto. So this entire poem, even though it's talking about flowers, it's specifically talking about poetry, where poetry comes from, and how anybody can create it ultimately. But more specifically, about how this poet, Shayakamach, the Titas Tizatlan, how he creates his poetry, his process. And in a way, he's kind of calling out the other poets. Haya alegría. You have happiness. You've found happiness. If you really are happy, si de veras te alegrarás en el lugar de las flores, tú ataviado con collares. Right? So he's kind of challenging the organizer of the poetry event here. So I mean, I recognize it's kind of a multi-layered poem when we look at it. It's kind of long to be discussing. Pero is there anything else that really stood out to you as we review it? Hmm. I think something that's worth calling out is the reference to la casa de la primavera. You know, it's a metaphor for the place where maybe inspiration resides, right? So that's something that you potentially could reference if you were to create your own, the place of inspiration. Obviously, remember the flower. When you reference a flower, you're referencing art and poetry. Todo eso viene del dador de la vida. That's something that is common. That's a key word that we would see in the Xochicuicue. And then if you notice again at the very beginning, los paralelismos. Oh amigos, a vosotros os ando buscando. Oh amigos, ha llegado vuestro amigo. They're parallels because it's a similar idea. I have been searching for you. Your friend has arrived. Here you have this parallel that introduces the poem. And then again, I, the less wealthy, y luego, ¿a dónde está? Yo, el humilde, I think is where he says. Here. Thine poor friend. Yo que soy vuestro pobre amigo. So those are also parallels. Does anyone have any questions?
I also see that he says like I am on the well you have a right to the arms of the big tree or something like that, the tree of flowers, which
Mhm,
kind of saying the main place where the arts are happening, kind of.
mhm.
And then goes into yeah, like the place that we were saying was this the temple of what?
De la primavera.
Primavera. And because it's when flowers come out, right?
Mhm.
Mhm. I like that you gave us the background because I kind of start putting pieces together.
Yeah. Yeah, and this one, it was important to give as much background as I could. Because, again, obviously we're talking about something that we're culturally removed from. So there's going to always be things that, we're not going to be able to understand. And that's okay. As long as the message comes across, ¿verdad? And if we have at least some of the context that we need in order to come to our own conclusion, I think that will help us in better appreciating where the poem is trying to take us. And for that reason, I wanted to challenge you all, to write your own Xochicuicue. Right. I wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of add to this, especially because many of us that are in the class, are descended from the region. We may not be specifically descended from the Nahua or from, the Mexica Tenochtitlan people, from the Aztecas, but we at least exist in a world where, this was part of the culture, the landscape. And, take inspiration from the poetry, take inspiration from the techniques, and try to write a poem in the Xochicuicat style. And remember, it's flowers that are a metaphor for the poetic, for the artistic, or for a spiritual element, even. And if you can, try to use either metonymy or kennings or both, if you can fit both of them in, and use them as a way to reinforce the theme of your poem. Obviously, the larger theme of the series is pájaros y galaxias, the birds and galaxies. But that could be a spiritual thing, a bird or the galaxy itself. We've had this discussion before. It's a spiritual element, a spiritual approach maybe that you can incorporate into your poetry. Así que, tienen esta semana que entra, para entregar algo. Y de aquí hasta el 16 de diciembre, well, maybe not specifically the 16th, but at least the next two sessions, we are able to dedicate as much time as we can to giving you feedback on your Xochicuicat or any other poem that you've written up to this point. So, yeah, aquí tienen su tarea y feel free to experiment. Don't I guess overwhelm yourselves with having to stick faithfully to what the Xochicuicat is. Um, because in the end, it's just trying to practice some different techniques that we've been covering. Abraham?
It's just a tip, I guess, for all who are gonna to try it. Download the worksheet so you know the words and the meaning of each one. So when you're trying it, you're not what was it? Because I bet you guys gonna be like, oh, let me see what this was, and then come back to it. This
Yeah,
is a lot of context that's gonna be important.
exactly. Yeah. And if you haven't downloaded it yet, I just put it in the chat one more time for you. So you can download the handout and hopefully be able to reference it as you're working on your Xochicuicat. All right. So we'll, oh, and if in case you wanted to find the books, aquí tengo las citas. So full on MLA style bibliography. So if you want to check out the books, I've only been able to find them in English, in Spanish. I'm sorry. I don't know if they exist in English, but por lo menos aquí tienen los nombres de los libros que usé. And it would be cool if you could find this poem in Nahuatl. Exactly, Abraham. 100 points for the person who can write it in Nahuatl. All right. So, con eso, yo creo que ya nos despedimos. Thank you everyone for logging in this extra session of Conchas y Café. Again, this is the last of the creative writing lessons for the fall 2025 series. Pero tenemos un par de semanas todavía que aún les podemos dar notas, sugerencias, opiniones, lo que necesiten para finalizar sus trabajos The last day to turn in your writing for potential publication in the next volume is December 16th. That Tuesday, December 16th, I will be available on Zoom to help anyone who is having difficulty uploading their work using Submittable. But if you're ready to go, you can start submitting your work now. And I will include the link in the next ¿cómo se llama? The next email newsletter. So, yeah. I hope you all enjoyed the session. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. You can also bring them up next week when we meet again. So, que se la pasen muy bonito. I hope you all enjoy your Thanksgiving break. And I will see you all next Tuesday. Hasta luego.
Thank you. Good night.
Night.
Gracias.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Bye.
Happy Thanksgiving.